Income is something that impacts a person's life greatly, from mental health to living situations, values and culture, and even to the size of a family. But what influences a person's average income? Does government corruption affect income in developing nations? I hypothesize as the CPI, the Corruption Perception Index, goes up, the average income, will also increase. The CPI, also known as the Corruption Perception Index, scores countries on a scale of 1 to 100, 1 being more corrupt and the most corrupt, and 100 being no corruption or the least amount. Many factors go into the score. Examples are the legal and judiciary systems, police force, banking, government systems, and more. Income can also be referred to as salary, meaning how much is a person earning and taking home. There are plenty of ways to earn income. Some are legal and some are not. In this study, the only income being analyzed will be legal avenues, seeing as this is what the government can trace and track. The population focused on in this data set is the population of a whole country at a time. The data includes many countries from all over the world. The selected countries came from many continents but were chosen based on whether or not they were considered a developing nation. I used the website World Population Review, which listed all the countries which are considered to be developing. A developing nation is one where there is less developed industrial base and or a low human development. There is debates whether a country is indeed developing or developed, but for the sake of consistency all the countries were picked from this list, meaning that they were all evaluated by the same standard. To choose the 30 countries, the random sampling technique was used so that there was no bias in what countries were chosen. This graph shows the average nation's income in each of the 30 selected countries in 2012. As you can tell, this data is very spread out, giving us a large range. Even though these are countries which have been labeled developing, some are still doing better than others, which explains for the couple outliers on the higher average side. In this case, it is Panama, Argentina, and Mexico, and they all have higher income averages, which can be accounted for multiple of reasons. A major one would be tourism, revenue, farming conditions, and in the case of Argentina, they have a very large industrial sector, which makes them a little bit more money than the average. At the opposite side of the outside factors influencing the lower outliers are for the most part, war. The Congo has been fighting in the Great War of Africa, which has caused bloodshed and poverty for most of the continent. Another reason why is the severe underdevelopment of its people. This shows us why some of our countries are so low and why they're either found in the continent of Africa or have still and have been plagued by war. This histogram shows us how most of the countries have income averages between approximately 4,000 and approximately just around 5,200. This is because that bar is the longest, showing the higher frequency of the data in that range. From simply looking at the graph, we can see that the data is very much skewed to the left, with more countries having less income than what is displayed by the mean. The mean is 7,498.87 thousand, which has been slightly skewed to the right, which is because of the higher income outliers which was mentioned previously. This box and whisker plot shows the average, also called the mean, at 7,498.87 thousand, which is at the blue line, the vibrant blue line. The interquartile range for the average income is 6,950, which is being displayed by the gold line. This shows how spread out the data is because of how large the IQR really is. All the values and measures of spread are displayed in this summary table. The mean was being 7,498.87 on average in 2012. The median was 5,890. In this particular set of data, there was no mode. In this case, the most representative value, or the best central tendency to be displayed, is the median. This is because it does not take into account the outliers on either end of the spectrum. The interquartile range is 69,050. The range is 18,547, and the standard deviation is 6,077. These measures of spread all show and lead to the same conclusion, that because of our higher and lower outliers, our data has a large spread. But from looking at the original plot that we did before, we can still see the data was never going to be very close in regards to spread, but the outliers are still playing a heavy effect on the spread. This graph shows the nation's score or rank on the Perception Index in all 30 countries in 2012. This data has a clear outlier, Afghanistan, which as it stands in 2012 was one of the most corrupt nations. This can be accounted and explained for by war. Afghanistan has been at war for a very long time. War changes many things for a country, and Afghanistan is desperate to win, which many believe is what has led to these many corrupt actions being taken place. The histogram shows us how most of the country's corruption scores lie between 32 and 40, seeing as those are the tallest bars, meaning that the frequency was higher in that range. From simply looking, we can see the data is only slightly skewed to the left from the lower outliers. The mean is 30.7, which might be slightly skewed to the left, but for the most part seems accurate when looking at the frequency of the tables and graphs. This box and whisker plot shows the average and/or mean at 30.7, which is the blue line. The IQR, which is the interquartile range for the Corruption Perception Index, also known as the CPI, is 10, which is displayed by the gold line. From this, and looking at the box itself, we can see from this graph that the data does not have that large of a spread. There is an outlier to the left, which is Afghanistan. With the updated Fathom, this outlier has not skewed the box plot too significantly, but is being represented as a dot. We know that the spread is not that large considering most of the data because of how small the interquartile range is. All the values and measures are displayed in this summary table, the mean being 30.7 in 2012, the median being 32.5, and the mode for this data set is 34. From all these central tendencies, it is clear that they all could, to a degree, accurately represent the data for corruption, seeing how they all fall in the same range, which was mentioned previously when analyzing the histogram. We know that the most frequent scores were from 32 to 40. But within all that, the median is the best choice. This is because it does not let the outlier of Afghanistan to influence the answer or given value. The interquartile range is 10. And the range is 35, and the standard deviation is 7.843, which could be 7.9. This shows us how close the data really is. The range in this case is not a good representation of the measure of spread because it's heavily influenced by the outlier of Afghanistan. The standard deviation and interquartile range are not off by that much, making them both decent representations. But, like again with the central tendencies, there is one slightly better than the other. In this case, it is the interquartile range. This is because it is influenced the least by the extreme outlier of Afghanistan. To put simply, the best central tendency to choose is the median at 32.5, and the best measure of spread to choose is the interquartile range, which is 10. In this scatter plot, which looks at the relationship between average income and the CPI, it is evident that there is a moderate positive correlation between these two variables. The equation of the linear trend line is shown just below the graph and is being represented by a turquoise line. A summary table was created for the two-variable graph, which shows the correlation coefficient between the two variables. The correlation coefficient is positive 0.6063, or 0.61 rounded, which shows a moderate positive correlation between the CPI score of each country and the average income in the chosen 30 developing countries in 2012. The first extraneous variable, and arguably the most important, in deciding someone's income is their intelligence, which is not always but is strongly related to their literacy rate. It is a known fact and trend that on average people who go to school and obtain degrees get higher paying salaries, ergo higher incomes. Developing countries are known for their poorer literacy rates when compared to developed countries. This can hinder a person's income greatly if they have not received proper schooling. Like it would in developed countries, it would significantly reduce their job options along with their pay options, giving them no choice but to earn less income. The second variable that needs to be considered is crime rates. These also impact the nation's income by skewing the legality of such income. This means a lot of the time this money exchange and profit is happening without anyone knowing. This can impact the average greatly if this is happening in large volumes. In developing countries, they are known to have trends of higher crime rates than in developed nations. Corruption in many cases itself is a crime. With the added crime and corruption, this needs to be taken into account when analyzing the income, because a lot of income might be going around without the government knowing. My hypothesis was confirmed because, as seen in the two variable scatter plot, there was in fact correlation between the average income and the CPI in a country in the year 2012. As the CPI increased, the average income increased, which caused the trend line on the two variable graph to go in an upward slope to the right. In other terms, this is seen with the correlation coefficient being a positive value that fits on the correlation scale in the moderate positive linear correlation range. What can help us see the correlation between income and the corruption in a country, especially a developing country, is actually helping us understand exactly what a developing nation is. There are many debates on what an actual developing nation really is. See, as for China, they have the largest GDP of the entire world, but they are still considered a developing nation because most of their country lives in poverty. Having this confusion can really skew the results one way or another. So having a clear definition of what a developing nation is can help us explore the correlation between income and corruption in developing nations more precisely.